what you do
Hmm.
and and how you do things is actually something that people can benefit from. Like you may not see it
Yes.
that way, but you have something that you can give.
Welcome to the Good Enough Mompreneur podcast. I'm your host, Angela Mashuli. Thank you for joining me on this episode, which is publishing on the last week of March, which is Women's History Month. And I see this interview as part of a series of 2 interviews that is going to be about women in podcasting and how podcasting can benefit your business should you be interested in starting your own podcast. So today's interview is with Allison Taylor, who is the host of Everybody's Gotta Eat. She's a military spouse, mompreneur, and comes from a line of amazing home chefs, and realized that she had a talent for taking the overwhelm and the stress out of planning meals and recipes for her family. So she started this wonderful podcast to help share those tips and to connect moms and give them permission to stop pressuring themselves so much about feeding their families. So I asked her to be on the show to, one, talk about her wonderful podcast, but two, to talk about what it was like starting her own podcast and that journey that she has gone through and how it has benefited her. And another really important part of Allison's podcast that I would like to highlight is that in how we do one thing, we do all things. And she really discusses ways that we can improve on how we approach situations, which honestly are so transferable to other areas of our lives, especially how we run and grow our businesses. So I find that aspect of Allison's podcast so fascinating. Then on Friday, I'm going to publish a second episode with an amazing woman who teaches women how to podcast. That is her focus and her mission. And honestly, she really helped me understand how important podcasting has been in my entrepreneurial journey and all of the opportunities that exist in starting your own podcast. So I'm going to be publishing that episode on Friday instead of next Monday because I just really feel called to publish it this month within Women's History Month. So be sure to check out that episode on Friday. So without further ado, here is my interview with the lovely Allison Taylor. Welcome, Allison, to the podcast. I am so excited to talk to you. And I think that you have an amazing mission and you have so much authenticity. You have such heart in what you do. So I will give you a little intro. You're a mom, of course, to three children, right? Yep.
Yes.
And you're a military spouse, somebody after my own heart. You come from a line of amazing home chefs, I hear, and you're the host of the podcast, Everybody's Gotta Eat, which I love.
That's right.
It's one of
Thank
my
you.
new favorite podcasts. And you share tips, recipes, and stories to take the overwhelm out of preparing food for our families. And I really love the special stories that you share in your podcast too. So, welcome. Thank you for spending time with me. And I can't wait to share your mission and who you are with my listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
You're welcome. So, tell us a little bit about you and your podcast.
Yeah, so I am a military spouse. We move all the time 3 children. Life is just chaotic a lot of the time. And other military spouses will understand my husband's hours are a lot and they're unpredictable and they change every so often. So with that, meal planning is huge for me. I am the cook of the household. My husband
Mhm.
will grill on the weekends and I love
Mhm.
that. But overall, I'm the one that does the grocery shopping, does the meal planning, does the cooking, just because his hours are so long and unpredictable. So, and I'm a stay-at-home mom. And so I love it. I love doing it. But I also, on the flip side, know how stressful it can be. And so I started this podcast because I was like, I'm having friends that are asking me, like, what's this recipe? I love this. I am onto something. And I just didn't realize it? And so I just want to kind of connect to other moms that are trying to feed their family and share the tips that I've learned over the years, the tricks in the kitchen, all of that.
I love that. What I feel is communicated in your podcast is not only how important the food is that we're providing our children, but the role that we play in preparing that, but using that to connect with our families and really, I hope we get to talk about it. Some of the tips that you share with parents on how to make meal prep and planning and cooking less stressful, I think really transfers to all aspects of their life and parenting. And I hope to dive into some of that because some of the tips that you have shared, I'm like, where was this podcast 15 years ago? I think that they're so special and they really hit home for me. So, yeah, let's just dive in and talk about one of the things
Yeah.
that you talk about in that you like to simplify things and not make them overwhelming. And
Yeah.
if you're a mom business owner or you're a mom, everything, your relationship with time changes. You have a lot more to get done in a day and you have to be purposeful and intentional. So, what are some tips that you can share that will help moms simplify meal planning, meal prep, cooking, and creating shopping lists?
Yeah, for sure. So, practically speaking, it's just starting small, starting with what you can sustain. You as a mom, you with your family, the dynamic of your household, what small change can you make that can sustain, you know? So, practically, I love using lists. I'm such a huge list maker. So, I take different different little bits of time that I find, like 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and I'll think of the meals that I want to have for the following week. And I
Mm-hmm.
just write the meals down. And then, when I have another 10 minutes, I'll write down the ingredients that I need for those meals. So I'll, you know, quickly run through the pantry and the fridge and see what I actually need to make those meals, write that down. And then I used to be so old school, and I'm like, no, I have to go to the grocery store. I have to. I want to see what I'm buying. But then, the pandemic changed everything. And now I'm so big on ordering your groceries. I'm so big on that. It saves so much time, so much money, and just like that mental energy, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
all the apps that are out there, even your local grocery store, if you order from them, they save all of your all of the items that you're usually buying. They save that. It's your list. And all you have to do is click, and like half of your grocery list is done. Saves so much time, so much mental energy. I am huge on that. And I do grocery pickup or grocery delivery. And then I do go to the store for a few things, because my son is 2 and he likes to get out of the house. And so we'll just, grab a few things to get him out of the house and, experience the grocery store, which I think is important too, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So yeah, I'm big on that. So, and then actually cooking, I think over the years, I have done this, so it's like really familiar to me, but when you look at a recipe and it looks too complicated, see what you can change to make it work for you and make it work for your family. So that could be as simple as replacing chopping an onion with onion powder. It's not, we're not like at a five-star restaurant,
We're
serving.
not on a cooking
We're gonna
show,
get
people. We're not going to get
right,
rated.
right. We're gonna get critiqued by our kids no matter what we serve.
Right.
So if it's gonna be too much for you to chop an onion, change it to onion powder. Like that's and such an easy way to simplify a meal. And then if it's like 25 ingredients, again, like see, okay, half of these I don't need, half of these my family doesn't like or wouldn't notice if it was missing. Just, pare it down to a realistic for time and for ingredients and just being in the kitchen
Mm-hmm.
for your mental energy. Just kind of try to pare it down. And I've done this so much over the years that like I have my own recipes, but just, those small changes like I was talking about, just looking at a recipe and if you're overwhelmed by it or it's going to take too long, see what you can change to be
Yep.
able to make it work for you.
Yes. And that was what I was talking about. When you give a little tip like that, we don't even consider we're so hard on ourselves. Like you mentioned one time, what we cook doesn't equate to whether we're a good mom or not. I mean, and we do subconsciously kind of incorporate
Oh my
that
gosh. Yep.
thinking. We judge ourselves like, oh, this is exactly what the recipe says I have to do, regardless of what you feel like doing, your energy level, what your family likes. And that's so transferable to what we do all the time.
Every aspect of life, we do
Yes.
that.
Yes, that's why I think your tips are so amazing because I think we can talk about this a little bit. Food had a real integral part of me growing as a parent and understanding my children. And had I just allowed that to happen and not listen to other people and, really kind of looked at it from what serves me and my family, it would have been a totally different story. So, and then just like paring it down to simple steps, like not having to do all the meal prep and list prep and every shopping and everything in one step. I mean, we force ourselves to do that because that's
Yeah.
what we think the right thing to do, or we think the perfect mom does, or whatever, or maybe that's what our mom did. Well, I think we're parenting at a different time in our in the world.
For sure.
So,
For sure.
and I have the same story when it comes to using things like Instacart. My daughter for the longest time was like, Mom, why are I would complain like, oh, I need this, but I don't want to have to drive. And she's like, why don't you do Instacart? I'm like, no, I'll just do it myself. It's okay. And we don't ask for help, right? It's
No,
so
that is such
bad.
that's such an example of what we go through as moms.
Right?
It's just like, no, we can't take the easy way.
Right. Yeah, it must be hard. If it's
Yeah.
not hard, I haven't like if I haven't groveled on my knees, it's not worth it. It's not
Yeah.
good. It's
Yeah.
not good enough for my family. And I have to chuckle every time I use Instacart now. I see like you've saved 1,000 hours.
I know. I know. And all
Yeah.
the extra money too, because when you're walking through the aisles, you're like, that looks good.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Costco probably hates it. They really shouldn't let Instacart
I know.
because I save so much. I can see the difference in when I go in the impulse buys compared to like this is it. Just bring me what I need. You know?
Yes,
Yeah,
totally. Yeah.
and managing your mental energy, like
Yeah.
what you
And
know.
that's the big thing. The big thing for me with me starting this podcast is food seems so trivial, right? Food seems like cooking dinner. It's just like we got to do it. Like hence the name. Everybody's got to eat. We just got to
Mhm.
do it. But we have to allow ourselves as moms to connect and admit when things are hard. No matter what you think everyone thinks about it, we have to allow ourselves and we have to like speak out. It is so
Mm-hmm.
mentally draining to always think about what we're making for dinner. It
Yes.
is so mentally draining to remember everything we need at the grocery store. And if we don't remember, then we're the ones that have to go run out and get it, or we are pivoting and running through the drive-through. But then we feel guilty. And it's like, well, it's all falling on us. And
Right.
so it's so hard sometimes to like verbalize and
Advocate for
articulate.
ourselves.
Yeah. It's like
Absolutely.
food is food, but it's like it's so much.
It is so much. And I think that that's another amazing point, that you obviously are experienced at making food and making recipes. And you're admitting that it's tough, even though you're experienced with that. And I think we also get into this trap of comparing ourselves. Well, oh, I didn't come from a line of home chefs or whatever, so that's why it's hard. No, it's universally difficult. And if
Yeah.
you just do a little intentional planning, I feel like I just won an Oscar when I can execute a meal plan for a week. Right?
And like
It's
stick with
just
it.
like,
I know.
yeah, it's like, what the,
Yeah. It's pretty
oh my God,
rewarding.
it is.
Yeah.
But, it's just incorporating a few different mindset shifts that can help you do that. And and it can be really difficult with children,
Yeah.
at different ages, and who have different palates and different. So we have a neurodiverse family, and I never understood food is a consistently difficult subject for us. It consistently changes textures, smells, what it looks like. I mean, all the senses that go into choosing food and trying to nourish our children. It is
Yeah.
so important. And I really particularly loved your episode on helping families with picky eaters. And just your message, I was just like, I was bawling. I was literally bawling,
Aw.
crying. I really was, because I think the advice that you give in that episode is so, and I'll link it in the show notes. If there is anybody listening to this podcast who is struggling with their family and trying to find what is going to make everybody happy, there are such amazing tips that I had to learn on my own. But if I could share it with anybody to take that stress away, because it can cause a lot of stress. I can't even explain. And we put so much pressure on ourselves as moms. We put so much pressure on our kids. So, can you talk about some of the advice that you shared in that episode?
Yes, absolutely. I think first of all, we have a lot of external pressure
Mm-hmm.
because we don't want to be judged. We want to feed our kids the right way at the right time. We want to keep up to date with what nutritionists are saying, what scientists are saying about certain foods, and always keep up with that and not have anyone judge us about what we're feeding our kids because they
Yeah.
do, and it's rough. And so I really had to reframe my thinking into what is best for our family. I'm going to take ownership of doing my own research for my own family
Mm-hmm.
and also instill in my kids the same thing. This is how we do it. Other
Mm-hmm.
families, you're going to see totally different things, but this is how we approach food and dinner and
Mm-hmm.
eating.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like that foundational thing that maybe our generation didn't really learn growing up.
Yes.
I think it's just, there's a lot of that happening. And I'm so happy to see that, like with all
Right.
aspects of raising children. And so it just has to start inside your own family. Stop looking at what other people are going to think or what other people are saying or doing. Just
Mhm.
what is going to work for your family and start there. And the advice for picky eaters or just kids in general, because all kids go through this,
Mhm.
you have to approach it as an experience.
Mhm.
It's learning. We are always learning about food.
Yep.
We are always learning new things. Scientists are always developing new research for food, right? So there's that aspect. But then there's also, we're constantly learning what we like and what we don't like. And that changes. It really
Mhm.
does change. There's so many foods that I didn't like 10
Mhm.
years ago. And now I'm like, oh, I do like them. It's the same thing for kids. And I think we just
Mhm.
have to give them that grace and that space to
Mhm.
just facilitate. We're just there to facilitate. We're not
Right.
there to force. We're not really there to like make them do anything. We're just there to help them.
Mhm.
And I love the guest speaker, food can just be a fun experience,
Yes.
and it's so easy to say like take the stress away.
Mhm.
That's easier said than done because we always bring an element of anxiety, like as we're putting that food on the table, like, is anyone going to eat this? What are they going to say? And sometimes our
Right.
feelings are in it, like
Mhm.
I'm not a good cook, and
Mhm.
so they're not going to like my food. There's
Right.
that. And then there's also like, I really just need my kids to eat.
Mhm.
I need them to have energy. I need them to not be grumpy or irritable. I just need them to eat. And so we bring that to them, but
Right.
they can sense that
Sure.
before it even hits the table. They can sense that. And, kids are so perceptive. They pick up on everything.
Right.
And so the less that we do that, the less
Mhm.
of that energy that we bring, the
Mhm.
more that I think and I've experienced, they're just going to eat,
Right.
you know?
Mhm.
And there are days where all three of my kids don't want to eat what I've made, but they ate it
Mhm.
2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
And it's okay. It's
Yeah.
honestly okay. And it's okay if that night they have a few extra snacks because they're hungry after dinner. That's
Mhm.
okay. We're always like, well, they didn't eat their dinner, so now they
Mhm.
don't get any snacks because
Yeah.
that's how it should be. It's like,
Right.
well, not necessarily. Like, don't you sometimes sit down and you're like, I'm just not really hungry. And
Right.
then like an hour later, you're like, I'm really hungry. I'm gonna, grab some snacks.
Right. And I think it's so important for us it's like a gateway to helping our kids like be in touch with how they feel, which is really important. And to be
Yes.
able to communicate that, which if you have a parent who is approaching food time like a war zone,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a lesson that it doesn't have to be that way. But if you take that pressure off, you might not only learn more about your child, but about yourself
Hmm.
and be more in tune with how you feel and approach it like an experience, like you said. So, so how do you handle it? Like, do you just like kind of do you have any backup meals or something like that when your kids are not feeling what you decided to cook?
I don't do that. Um, just because like it's just too much for me to
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
make a second meal. Like, but I know that works for some people.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, it's like literally day by day. Each
Yeah.
day is different, but I think that it's also important to know each of your kids. So my
Yes.
oldest is like the negotiator, the like she wants reason and logic and everything. So if she's not feeling dinner
Hmm.
and she's like, "Well, can I eat this and then be done?" And it's like, sure, because she wants that dialogue.
Hmm.
And then, or we can go back and forth, and I can say, yeah, sure. And how about we eat all the green vegetables too? And
Hmm.
then you can be done.
Hmm.
Whatever it is. And then sometimes
Right.
she's like, well, can I use buffalo sauce? Because she loves buffalo sauce.
Yeah, I
And
loved
I'm
your
like,
tip about adding
sure.
sauces. Right.
because then she feels that ownership, and
Hmm.
that's super important to her.
Right.
And it actually makes me very proud of her when she is, we call it negotiating or like whatever, she's being rebellious, but I really think it's like setting her life up. I mean, she's going to be a young woman. That's so important to me to see
Right.
her do those things.
Right.
And so, okay, a little buffalo sauce, I'm good with it.
Right.
And then my middle child, she loves, she just loves to learn
Mm.
about things. Like
Hmm.
my oldest does too, but she's more of like that negotiator. But my middle child, if I tell her what each food will do for her and do for her body or do for her brain, she's all over it, and she remembers. So then there are nights where she's like, well, I think I'm just going to eat the chicken because I really want muscles for Taekwondo. And I'm like, that's great. That's awesome.
Uh-huh.
And then she's super proud of her good eyesight. Like she can always find whatever toy is missing. She
Uh-huh.
loves that. And so she's like, I'm going to eat my carrots for my eyes. Like she really,
Right.
she loves to know what the food is doing for her.
Uh-huh.
And it helps her do what she needs to do.
Hmm.
And so she's also taking ownership. And then my 2-year-old,
Well, see, you
that's
have
a,
the age differences too. You're also
yeah,
like communicating on different levels, and
yes, yeah,
it's not easy, but
no,
so what
it's
is your
not.
2-year-old like?
Well, you can pretty much like sprinkle some cheese on anything and he'll eat it. And he has a really good appetite, but he's really into this like anything that's green. He's like, bleh. It's so cute. He's like, I don't like that bleh. I'm like, okay. But I add another thing. Like I feel like I'm just like constantly saying this all the time, but I add spinach to like
Hmm.
everything.
Hmm.
And I break it up into such tiny pieces
Hmm.
that they really don't notice it. Or they're so used to me doing it, they don't care.
Yeah.
But he eats so much spinach and he has no idea that it's blah.
I love that. Oh gosh. But yeah, I mean, it takes effort to communicate with your kids like that, but they're learning so much and you're teaching them amazing skills. Like you said, you're giving your daughters agency about what
Yeah.
they like and they don't like, and they're going to transfer that to other things.
Hmm.
And that is just going to serve them so well in the future because
Yeah, for sure.
it
I
does,
know.
it really transfers. Um, so
And
I,
disclaimer,
yeah,
there are nights where I don't do that. I'm like,
sure. Well, yeah, I mean,
okay, there are nights where I'm like, eat what you want and then go have 500 pretzels in 10 minutes. Okay, that's fine. Like okay.
yeah.
And then there are nights where I'm like, well, I only gave you 2 tablespoons, which is your serving size. So we're gonna eat it, okay?
Mhm.
I'm not, because you have to know your kids. I guess that's the bottom line. There are times where I can
Right.
tell that they just are being a little bit rebellious
Hmm.
and they're just testing their boundaries. And those times I'm like, no, we're gonna eat it all because I gave you like one serving size. So
Hmm.
that's what you need. And you have gymnastics tonight. And so you really should eat. Otherwise you're gonna be really hungry.
Right.
But yeah, it's not everything has to be this like teaching experience,
Sure.
like this like beautiful, like, okay, there are nights where I just don't have it in me
Right.
to do that. But
Right.
I think it's just knowing your kids.
Yes. And I think that we put the focus on the process or the meal or the situation instead of them, and merely doing that focus and realizing that it's an opportunity to connect with them on some level. It's not going to be this, after school special moment every night. But
For
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
it is definitely an opportunity where we can kind of slow down and kind of think about our actions. And we have meals several times a day, and just because we don't put the focus on it doesn't mean that it's less important. It's less important to you, but it's still the gravity of what it is there. So we talked about it a little bit, but I would love it if you would share some tips on how you approach like finding a variety of meals and meal planning, because that is overwhelming. Like when you cook the same thing all the time, you get complaints. And so how do you approach that?
Yeah, so one thing that I do that's like saved me so much mentally is I have a Pinterest
Mm-hmm.
account and I have a food board, and you can have different sections within the board. And so I have all these different sections of like different cuisines, I guess you could say. So I have
Mm-hmm.
a pasta section that has, lots and lots of pasta recipes, and I have like Asian inspired salads, soups, crock pot recipes. I can never remember them all. See, that's like mentally,
Yeah,
I'm like just not capable. But when I go to
right,
my Pinterest, they're there.
right.
And each day of the week is a
Mm-hmm.
different cuisine. So we love Tex-Mex. And so we do Taco Tuesday every Tuesday, but it's some form of Tex-Mex. It's not tacos every
Right.
Tuesday. Because we'd probably get complaints about that. But in my Tex-Mex section of my
Uh-huh.
food board, there's a lot of different recipes. So I get inspiration like, oh, we haven't had enchiladas in a while. I'll do that. Or I guess we've had like, ground turkey tacos.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do chicken tacos.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just super easy. And you just go to each section. And so then there's a variety during the week. You're not,
Mm-hmm.
cooking burgers every night,
Mm-hmm.
but you could if that worked for you. But that way it's like I'm not really even doing any thinking. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going and looking and visually seeing the different recipes, getting
Mm-hmm.
inspiration,
Mm-hmm.
and then writing them down. And that's like it takes like 5 minutes.
Yeah, so not even if like you're meal planning intentionally, let's just say that you're just feeling uninspired by food, which happens to everybody. It's
Hmm.
just you have food fatigue.
Yes, for sure.
It is, it's a lot. So that is a great way to just feel inspired again too. And then you
Yeah.
even do this for people. Like if you don't have the
Yeah.
time and Pinterest is overwhelming, I think that that's an amazing idea that,
Thank you.
yeah, that somebody can do this for you, because I know a lot of people who just feel overwhelmed. It's like another thing to figure out. And
For
then
sure.
here it is, like a done for you. And then they can order their groceries, and it is one or two or three less steps that you have to mentally worry about with your meal planning.
Yeah. And it's kind of getting rid of that dread too.
Right.
Like, oh, I have to think about this and I don't want to,
Right.
because I I like food. I like to
Mm-hmm.
eat.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there are times where I'm like, I don't know what sounds good. And another thing you can do is involve your kids. So you
Yes.
can ask them, I am coming up with meals for next week. What sounds good? And if
Right.
they say pizza, great.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have a vegetable on the side. What vegetable should we have on the side?
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of like have that, pizza doesn't always have vegetables. Well, the pizza
Right.
that kids eat.
Right.
So just make it another thing that they can come up with, like
Right.
for the meal. So I do that sometimes where I'm like, I don't know, hey guys, what sounds good for dinners? And they're like
Mm-hmm.
chicken nuggets and macaroni and cheese. And I'm like, okay, and what vegetable? They always forget those
Right.
vegetables.
Oh, right. Yes.
But yeah, that helps too. But when it feels like so mentally draining, it's so important to have a system in place where it's just kind of automatic
Yes.
instead of like all on you. So I
Yeah.
really feel like the Pinterest thing, or even if you just write a big list
Mm-hmm.
yourself
Right.
of different cuisines that your family
Mm-hmm.
enjoys and write some
Mm-hmm.
recipes, you can kind of rotate, you
Right.
know? each. I think every few months is okay, like to repeat
Oh, yeah.
different things, like
I
every.
think so too.
So yeah, if you just find some time to do that, you're gonna
Mhm.
thank yourself on the days where you're like, I know I have to do this, but I don't want to.
Yes. And that's what I think if you just try to be intentional, like purposely make some time to do that. And it's kind of harder when your kids get older because you're competing with their friends or devices or whatever, and they have fuller schedules. And then I've found that if it's during a mealtime, they're eating, they're kind of thinking about food, and then we kind of talk about it. And Pinterest is really helpful to me because sometimes my kids, if you just say something, it's not, doesn't sound appealing. But if you show a picture, that can go, oh, that looks good. Or that can start a different conversation or get a different reaction.
Yeah, and I think it also helps with the everyone looks to you as like the cook, right? Because my daughters do this too. Like, what are we having for dinner? And I'm like, it's really hard to explain. It's this and this and this. And they're like,
Uh-huh.
I don't think I like that. And I'm like, okay. So if you can show them a picture and get them
Mm-hmm.
involved,
Yes.
then you're not like taking on that manager role. It's like a group effort, you
Mm-hmm.
know? I saw this on Pinterest. What do you think? Oh, that looks yummy. Great.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you're more collaborative than just like it being all
Absolutely.
on you.
Yes.
Even though it still is technically, just that involvement makes it feel a little easier, you know?
It does. I think you're totally right. And I love your tips on getting them to participate in, the cooking experience. Like find a way that is not overwhelming and stressful to you to like, I'm going to give you this one little task or, and that not only gets them involved, but you're right. It does make it seem easier. It's like, it feels less on you. And then
Yeah.
two, take them to the grocery store. Like they need ideas just like we do. I mean, even my husband is a diabetic and he has to eat, he's very purposeful about what he eats. And that's very hard for me to see things. But he makes a point of like, okay, I'm going to get this trail mix and da da da, and this like yogurt, and and that's just so helpful. I mean, we all need that inspiration, and it's for some reason it's almost like we treat our children different than ourselves. I don't, I don't
Yeah.
know how we do that, but we
I
do.
know. Yeah.
But yeah, definitely like they're just like us in food. Like you said.
Hmm.
And I notice this, I don't know if you notice this, but when my kids are not going through a growth spurt, they just don't want to eat as much.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. So that takes the pressure off of them as well, because I think we
Yeah.
put so much pressure on them that we don't even realize. And
Yeah.
kids have enough pressure with school and friends and everything else. If this is one thing that we can make easy, that's sustaining them and helping them with their energy, I don't know. That's why I love your podcast
Yeah.
because I think it's so important.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's too like helping them have a healthy relationship with food
Yes.
because I grew up having to clean my plate. I think that's just kind
Yes.
of like what our parents were taught to do, what
Right.
we're supposed to do, right?
Right.
Um, and that's hard to break away from still to this day.
Right.
And so I have to be really intentional about what I put on my plate because
Right.
otherwise I'm gonna eat it. It's like ingrained in me.
Yes.
And a really great question is just like your body telling you, is your tummy telling you, is your belly telling you you're full?
Hmm.
And if they say yes, and then 10 minutes later they want a snack, you can say, maybe you weren't hearing your belly right. And so you're just setting up them listening to themselves, like,
Right.
and it's again, it's taking it off of you. You're not forcing them. You're not like dictating what they're eating and how much they're eating, but you are helping them learn, like, okay, if you're asking for a snack, maybe next time we eat a little more because you didn't hear what your body was telling you.
Right.
And there's never going to be an end point to this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to all of a sudden they get it, right? Because I still have I still have a relationship to food that's ever changing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I grew up, I became a teenager. Being a teenage girl is really hard when it comes to food and seeing other girls your age and what they look like. And,
Mm-hmm.
back when I was little, when I was younger, seeing all those things in the media too, like
Mm-hmm.
those different messages. And you have to retrain your brain. And again, I'm loving everything I'm seeing because it's taking so much, like the term diet culture,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
love that because let's stop all of that,
Right.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
like let's just do what works for us, you
Right.
know? So yeah, I
Absolutely.
mean, like we're not going to arrive at our destination with our kids, you know? And we have to allow for them to have days where they don't want to eat, days when they're so hungry that they're asking for food all the time. That's okay
Right.
too,
Mm-hmm.
just giving them that space because we also, if you look at yourself, you go through the same journey with food. You never arrive.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we definitely have changed because I grew up with a very limited diet. So I'm still exploring foods because my mom was a very picky eater and we had a very Southern diet. But I married somebody with an Italian background who, has pasta like at every holiday. And I'm like, what is this? But it's amazing food. But yeah, and when you're in the military, you can't help but be exposed to all these different foods and cultures, which is an amazing part of being in the military is you get to experience all those different places you move and the people that you live near and you go to their houses and share food and things like that. It is definitely an evolving continuing journey
Yes.
for sure.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what is like one of your go-to recipes that everybody's gonna love and we can share it?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I will make a some sort of pasta.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always kind of like off the cuff, but it always has to have pasta, of course, cheese. My kids love cheese. And I like to do like turkey sausage, like the link.
Mm-hmm.
I'll cut it up because my kids love, hot dogs and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
and or like a ground turkey.
Mm-hmm.
And then my like go-to seasonings
Mm-hmm.
are onion powder, garlic powder, chili powder, and paprika, and then salt and pepper. And it's like a one pot dish. So you
Right.
brown the meat, put the pasta in, and some like chicken broth or vegetable broth. You can even do water and everything will be okay
Yep.
because then you add a couple of cups of cheese and it's like this pasta dish, which I'm sure I'm offending your husband, so I'm very sorry. Because Americans do
Okay.
not treat pasta the right way.
Right.
But
Yes.
that is like my kids will always eat that, and I always add my spinach.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yep.
it's just my trick. I don't know. And like
Yes.
spinach is a superfood, so I feel so good knowing that I'm like getting those vegetables in there. And I've also found if you like chop broccoli up really, really tiny,
Mm-hmm.
it serves the same way. Like they don't really
Mm-hmm.
notice it. They know it's in there, but it's not really offending them. So yeah.
Or we hope anyway. So
Yeah.
what are one of your favorite recipes from your childhood that either your mom or your grandmother would make you?
So, oh gosh, there's like so many, but something that this is so ironic now that I'm thinking about it, because like the women in my family were the cooks, but my dad made like the best barbecue chicken on the grill. And I remember that is what I asked for my birthday dinner, like every year was barbecue chicken. And honestly, I don't even remember what else we had, but was so good. And it just like, just good memories. My birthday's in
Right.
September, so it was kind of like the end of the summer. And I guess it just like made me feel like family, happy, it brought up emotions more than anything. Um,
Right.
but yeah,
No, I love that.
yeah,
And I think I've talked to other people about this, how, Americans especially treat mealtime and don't give it the specialness. But I think as military spouses, we're in this special position to remind people because for me, I know that recipes I would make my kids would love, and we would connect it with memories when my husband would be home. And it would kind of give this continuity to times when, they weren't, we couldn't all be together. And so I just love that aspect of, you know, your podcast and the ability to remind people of that. Um, so let's talk about your podcast for a minute. And,
okay.
food is so important to being moms, but I also love the fact that any endeavor like that is it's not easy to get the courage to start a podcast. And I mean,
Yeah,
kudos to you for that. I mean,
thank
it's
you.
it takes having been in that position less than a year ago, it's not easy, and I know that. So how did you find the courage to do that, and what's been some of your challenges?
Yeah, so I definitely it's hard. It definitely is hard. And I over the years have dabbled in different things. Becoming a mom, that's your journey. I became a stay-at-home mom,
Mm-hmm.
and then mom was kind of my identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized I wanted more for myself so
Mm-hmm.
that I could show up better for my kids and be the best mom. And it's so funny because over the past 10 years, I've just wanted to really encourage other moms, right? But
Mm-hmm.
what's funny is like it's like sharing in the struggles, right? Because I have
Mm-hmm.
not arrived. I'm not an expert in anything, but I just always have wanted to connect with moms and just like be in it together, right? Like we're in this together.
We're in this together.
We get we get the struggles, right?
Yes.
As hard as they are to explain to other people that are
Mm-hmm.
not in the midst of it,
Mm-hmm.
like we get it, you know?
Yeah.
And so I joined this community to start my podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and I really struggled with my idea because it felt trivial. I'm like, nobody's gonna want to listen to me talk about like meal planning and recipes. And then one of my really good friends was like, no, you have to do this. And she just helped me see like sometimes what you do
Mm-hmm.
and and how you do things is actually some that people can benefit from. Like you may not see it
Yes.
that way, but you have something that you can give. And so I went all in. This community that I was a part of, like, just helped me keep taking the next step.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I just struggle with imposter syndrome. It's
Right.
really hard for me to like accept any wins from my
Right.
podcast. I'm just like, well, that's not a big deal, or these people are doing much better, or whatever it may be. It's really hard, but at the end of the day, I'm having so much fun. And
Right.
I keep thinking when I do my podcast,
Mm-hmm.
I imagine myself talking to one mom who has, like a newborn and a toddler and a school-aged kid, and she's just like in the really hard part. And I just imagine that I'm talking to her and just trying to connect. It's
Right.
not about the food. It's not about the meal planning. It's
Mm-hmm.
about let me help you make it easier. Let me help you see that there are ways, there are new ways to think about things that's
Mm-hmm.
going to help you feel better about yourself.
Yes, 100%. I'm so glad you listened to your friend because you have a very special podcast. And
Thank you.
I would love to hear about like how just in the early stages, how do you think that that has transformed you? Because I really want to speak to anybody who's in that spot because in the early days, you're just having to go blind. You don't know why you're wanting to go. And so trying to communicate to keep going and why and what it can really, help you develop. So how has
Yeah.
it helped you?
Oh my gosh, it's helped me so much. And I feel like so much growth, so much
Right.
personal growth. I feel so like secure in who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I feel proud of myself. I feel like the consistency that I've been able to show myself
Mm-hmm.
just like propels me forward.
Right.
So, I mean, and this is just for any entrepreneur. Like
Mm-hmm.
you go into it and you have these like big, amazing dreams for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're getting started or you have to do something new and you have to take those steps, it's very hard because you're not necessarily making a monetary gain from it yet, but
Mm-hmm.
you're making all these like investments, like
Mm-hmm.
energy, financial investments, all of these things because you're betting on yourself.
Right.
So that's really hard, but man, is it rewarding when you just like keep going.
Yes. I mean,
And you,
especially as moms, we're used to taking care of everybody else, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah.
So,
So I just keep taking the steps, and through this, like it's so nice to know that I can still learn things,
oh,
you know?
yeah,
That's so
absolutely.
validating. It's so validating to know like I can sit down and figure something out still. You know,
Phil, oh,
I'm not
yeah.
19 years old anymore, but I still can like, that's really validating because we're just like always like knee deep in diapers or toys or our kids' projects and homework and their struggles. And we don't have a lot of time to
Mm-hmm. Right.
to put towards like our personal development, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So just to know that I am still capable is really
Yes,
validating.
not only are you capable, but you're really connecting. You're doing like what you sought out to do. You totally are because I mean, it's some food has really impacted my life. It's just been such a struggle. I mean, I had this situation where I was in line returning a crock pot that didn't work. And this lady is like, "Oh, why are you returning that?" And I was like, "Oh, it's not working. And I can't, like, I have to make crock pot meals because my daughter wants me to hold her all the time." And she's like, "Oh, no, you need to, like, stop that right now. Let me tell you." And I was like, what? I am not going to not hold my child because some lady at Walmart told me not to, and I need to not make this crock pot recipe.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So, yes, we are constantly given messages and opinions and judgments about food. So, I
Yep.
mean, kudos.
I would nurse my middle child while I'm stirring dinner.
There you go. Yeah, it's
I totally relate to that. I had also a daughter that wanted to be held all the time. And
right.
yeah.
And I
But yeah,
was
I mean,
not willing to put away what I knew was right. Like she needed me. And
hmm
that's my job. And but I also
yeah.
have this other job to feed my family and that's okay. Like you can do this. Like it is
hmm
possible. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I think delivering that message around something that all parents struggle with is just it's awesome. So it
Thank
sounds like
you.
you might have already gone over this, but what's like a message that you want moms to take away from your podcast?
I mean, first, it's just starting small and it's really what you're thinking about your what you're feeding your family. It's
Mm-hmm.
coming, you have to have it come from like what you want and what you desire for your family, not fear or anxiety or all of that external pressure. Because it's never going to be sustainable if you act from those places. So if you in your heart are feeling like you need to make a change,
Mm-hmm.
start small and just build upon that. Whether it's adding more nutrition or meal planning or figuring out time savers, you just need to start small. Like if you are running through the drive-through 5 nights a week and you're like, that's kind of expensive, I need to, maybe not as healthy, take away one of those nights and just plan a meal, just start small. We're so all or nothing as a society.
We are.
And when we
Yes.
fail or when we think
Uh-huh.
we fail, then it's just like, we're done.
It's not for me.
Right, right. So just start small and
Mm-hmm.
no 2 weeks are going to look the same. We
Mm-hmm.
know that. And so just be
Right.
gentle with yourself and know that there are all these other women, all these other moms that are in it with you,
Mm-hmm.
and we understand.
Right.
And I
And,
feel like that sense of community is huge because
yeah.
you can feel pretty isolated
Mm-hmm.
as a mom.
Oh,
You go through
yes.
those periods of time where you feel
Mm-hmm.
pretty isolated,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
that's another big thing for me is like we get it.
Mm-hmm.
I
We do.
have a small group of listeners, but we get it, you
Yes.
know?
Yes. Well, I hope people will, you'll gain more listeners by being on this podcast because I think every parent honestly could listen to it and get takeaways. Not only everything that you just said is not only applicable to food, it's applicable to living your life. It's applicable to running your business. It's
Yeah.
everything that you do and how you approach it in small steps and having grace and being gentle with yourself. Those are all things that all of the business owners come on my podcast and talk about. So where can listeners connect with you and they can obviously listen to Everybody's Gotta Eat wherever you
Yes.
listen to podcasts.
Yep.
And so where can they find you on Instagram and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so everybody's.gotta.eat is my Instagram handle.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, in I'm sure in the show notes, you'll link to that, but
Mm-hmm.
you can
Yeah.
also get on my email list
Mm-hmm.
where I'll be sending recipes,
Yeah.
just to help out and different tips and tricks. So
I love that. I super fan.
thank
Like it
you.
wasn't already like
Thank you
evident.
so much.
I do. I just man, when I get the opportunity to support another mom in their endeavor and I see so much of myself and you and where you are and where you can go, you got so much ahead of you. And thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your time and your tips. And I hope lots of folks connect with you. I really do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And that's another thing. Like, if you are wanting to start something, the community that you're going to find, like, just meeting you, Angela, and like hearing what you have to say about me, I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, we would never meet if it were
Yeah,
not for this. So
right,
that's like a big reason to start. You're going to find
right,
some like gems of people.
right. And that's the acronym for my podcast. For a reason. That's why I
Yeah.
stuck with it. But too, what I think is amazing is that you didn't go into it saying, or maybe you did, but you overcame it, was, oh, there's a million people talking about food, or everybody talks about food. It doesn't matter. It's not the way that you do. Like you have such authenticity and heart in what you're saying, and it just comes from this really genuine place that I don't think if you wrote a blog or it may not communicate
Yeah,
the same way. There is something so personal about a podcast. And
definitely.
it's something that you can as a mom really create something that is yours and your own, and it doesn't take too much time and it is pretty simple to do.
Yeah.
um, But yep. And I'm going to be talking in a few weeks with a woman who teaches women how to podcast. So I'm
Oh,
excited about that.
cool.
Yeah.
Yay.
I know, I feel just so blessed to have these conversations and just get to talk to amazing women like yourself. So again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. This was truly amazing. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I love it. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
Thank you again to Allison for being on the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom about taking the stress out of meal planning and meals for our family and giving us the permission to stop pressuring ourselves so much and seizing the opportunity to connect with our family and actually utilize the opportunity to just be better. And I think all of us could use that reminder to be more mindful in how we do things with our children, especially the important things like mealtime. So I'm going to leave all of the information to connect with Allison in the show notes. So that is when you find the podcast, it's all of the notes as you scroll down at the end of the show. Be sure to follow the show so you don't miss an episode. And I have a special episode coming out on Friday to round out Women's History Month, as I mentioned in the beginning. So be sure to do that. If you're enjoying this content, please leave a review. It means so much to me. It helps me know that content is resonating with you, and then it helps other mompreneurs find the podcast. It's totally free. And totally free to follow the show and subscribe. So we come out usually with a new episode every Monday. And so if you subscribe, you won't miss an episode. You just get a little notification that the new episode is available. So thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Good Enough Mompreneur podcast. I'm your host, Angela Mishuli, and I hope you have a fantastic week. And don't forget, not only are you good enough, you're probably overqualified. So don't forget that, Mama. Keep up the great work. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.